I get some thumbs up if you can see this? Okay, cool. All right. So, will Stoicism save the world? The case for being a Stoic during the meta crisis. So this will probably go on a YouTube channel, the Stoa YouTube channel. So this is not a Stoa presentation. This is an Interintellect salon hosted by me, Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa. So let's go in. So apparently Stoicism was talked about at a previous Interintellect salon. Some shots were fired. The opium of the masses. So we discussed Stoicism in our Aristotle salon. One of the attendees said Stoicism is the opium of the masses. Whew. You know, as a Stoic, I love when Stoicism is misunderstood in this way because it is an opportunity to practice my Stoicism. And we'll get to what Stoicism means in a moment. But I was trying to figure out, like I was trying to search, what is one graphic that will describe Stoicism perfectly? You know, like one of those infographics that like, you know, just like, okay, that's it. And I found it, like, you know, so here it is. Stoicism in one slide. So there is the Stoic Chad. You know, he doesn't care about externals, a more fat day, unaffected by praise, interesting physiology, could be a slave or an emperor. This is a version of everyone else, you know, victim mindset, complains constantly, needs comfort, cares about others' opinions. So, you know, I could probably end the presentation here because, you know, this is pretty much Stoicism in a nutshell. But, you know, we'll explore a little bit further what it actually means. So what really is Stoicism? The opium of the masses kind of comment is usually when people see that they know about Stoicism, like, no, that's dictionary Stoicism. And if you notice, there's like a lowercase Stoicism and there's an uppercase Stoicism. So dictionary Stoicism is like emotionless, serious, humorless. And when people hear the word Stoic, often they hear kind of like that sort of like Spock-like energy. That's different from philosophical Stoicism. And here's my definition of philosophical Stoicism. It's a super sexy philosophy as a way of life that, when embodied, encourages one to live in accordance with nature or to be in right relationship with reality. And so philosophy of the way of life is, of course, Pierre Hadot's term. Embodiment, as we'll talk about in a moment, Stoicism is a philosophy that encourages embodiment. And their axiomatic kind of goal is to live in accordance with nature. I feel that's kind of like an outdated phrase. So I like to prefer being in right relationship with reality, and I think they're the same thing. And if you do philosophical Stoicism right, you end up having this sort of like appearance about you. You have this Ryan Gosling smoldering good looks. So it's something to aspire to. And this is another good way to look at Stoicism. This is from Brad Inwood's nice little introduction of Stoicism. A very short introduction. He breaks up Stoicism into large Stoicism and minimal Stoicism. So large Stoicism is the standard approach that aimed to integrate physics, logic, and ethics. So the classic Stoics, which started in ancient Greece, they had three components: physics, logic, and ethics. They viewed them as equal, that you needed to study. But then minimal Stoics just argued that all was needed was ethics. And most modern Stoics, myself included, they fall more into the minimal Stoicism because the physics and logic, at least practiced in the original Stoics, were pretty outdated. And I would, you know, I would softly argue that minimum viable physics and classical logic or logical reasoning is afforded when one engages in Stoic and an ethical approach. So let's double click on minimal Stoics, the ethics portion. Stoic is a virtue ethics. And this is my boy, Matthew Sharp. He wrote this really awesome piece called Stoic Virtue Ethics. The famous Stoic claim is that virtue is the only good, marks it off as one of the definite ancient Stoic virtue ethics. Stoic virtue ethics, like Aristotle, places a premium on the cultivation of character or ethos of agents. And I'm not looking at the chats right now, but I'm like dying to see what is being said by all the cult the cult of Marcus. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, cool. So what is virtue? Yeah, essentially, it's following the Socratic and cardinal virtues. It's the same thing. This is what the Stoics understand. So this is a graphic from Donald Robinson. So wisdom or prudence or practical reasoning. This is the mother, known as mother of all virtues. All the other virtues unfold from this. And then fortitude or courage. You can't enact what is wise to do if you don't have the courage to do it. There's a lot of temptations in the world as well. So we need temperance to be in right relationship with all that. And then justice. And justice is understood in many ways, but it's really living in harmony with others. And you may argue living in harmony with all the different sub-personalities within. So that is a virtue, and we can kind of unpack what those are in the conversation. And this is kind of cool. So this is sort of like, I got this from Massimo Pigliucci's How to Be a Stoic. And if you're wondering like, okay, how does Stoicism tie with all the Hellenistic philosophical traditions? So this is a philosophical family tree. It all starts with the OG of philosophy, Socrates, who viewed wisdom as the chief good. And that's sort of like all these have in common is like, figuring out how to live the good life. And then, so this sort of lineage was Plato. Plato basically agreed with Socrates, but then he added all this metaphysical stuff. And then Aristotle came after, and Aristotle, he agreed that virtue is needed for the good life, for eudaimonia, but he also said we need external goods like, family, health, etc. So some luck is needed in the Aristotle's view, and the good life is not available for everyone. And then this lineage, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, but it's more about increasing pleasure and reducing pain. And this school is more about kind of moment to moment pleasure, bodily sensations. And then Epicurus, of course, the Stoics' arch enemies, they're the same thing about increasing pleasure and reducing pain, but it was more sophisticated. It was about mental pleasures, and they viewed it as a lifelong process, not just a moment-to-moment thing. And of course, the Cynics, this lineage, the Cynics were hardcore. Like the other schools, unlike the other schools, they viewed virtue as the only thing that is needed, and nothing else is needed. They were hardcore ascetics, super frugal and all that stuff. And the Stoics basically agreed with the Cynics that virtue was the only thing needed. But they allowed worldly pleasures, and they called it preferred indifference. So, you can have a glass of wine and like a warm bath every now and again. Myself, I like to have a cigar or two once a week. So that is sort of like the Hellenistic family tree and how kind of the good life shakes out in it. And so if you follow prudence, practical reason, I would say these are certain kind of principles emerge, and this is what I call Stoic heuristics. If you just Google like how to be a Stoic or read any kind of self-help type book on Stoicism, they'll talk about these things like dichotomy of control, obstacles the way, memento mori. And I've used Stoic heuristics as, this is sort of my phrasing, heuristics that have been teased out from past Stoics who have attempted to live with prudence. And so I'll just do three famous ones. And this is Epictetus right here is my favorite Stoic, and all the quotes are from Epictetus. So dichotomy of control. This is like really focusing on what is in your control, which is your actions and thoughts, and then getting them in right relationship with one another. So Epictetus, what we should always be asking ourselves, is this something that is or is not in my control? Amor fati, love of fate. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, rather wish that what happens happen the way it happens, then you will be happy. So this is kind of like if you could author all of your life's events, and then one event that kind of like disrupts your serenity, you would author that in your life. That's sort of the approach that you have to all these kind of unpleasant things. And then negative visualization, when you suspect something difficult's coming, you visualize it in advance, not only to intellectually process it, but to emotionally process it. And we'll talk about this in a moment, or more in a moment. And there's so many more Stoic heuristics. I use actively about 10 of them. and we could talk about that perhaps in the conversation. So in ecology, a Stoic ecology of practices. This is my colleague and friend John Vervaeke when he was speaking at the Stoicon that I hosted before COVID came online. So ecology of practices is active practices that are interdependent. So you just think of an athlete training for some sport. They have to do multiple different practices, but those practices are in relationship with one another. They support one another. And so if you think of, like, say, our friends at the monastic academy, this is kind of like a Buddhistic type place. They have all these cool practices like meditation, circling, some kind of coaching modalities, but they're related to each other, and they're in service towards being in right relationship with reality. So there's Stoic practices like journaling, which I do every day, view from above, breath work, that we can tease out from the ancient text, but there's no living Stoic ecology of practice. And this excites me, actually, because the entrepreneur, the philosophical entrepreneur in me says this is an opportunity to figure that out. So the phases of Stoicism. So this is the early Stoa. That's where Zeno, that's this guy right here. He started hanging out at a place called the Stoa Pocaeli. And then those painted porch. And then they say, hey, look at those Stoics. So that's how they got their name. So that was in Greece. Middle Stoa, and then the late Stoa. This is the Roman Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. There is no full text existing from the first two Stoas, the first two phases. All the full texts exist from the late Stoa, and that's perhaps why the modern Stoics are focused on Stoic minimalism, because these existing texts are more ethics based. Then it had somewhat of a revival in the 1500s with Neo-Stoicism. It's like a fusion of Christianity and Stoicism. I don't think that lasted long. And then the modern Stoic movement, which I'm a part of, it's really started in 2012. Christopher Gill, who's sort of like the godfather of modern Stoicism, brought all these kind of Stoic scholars and authors, psychotherapists together, like Donald Robinson, Jules Evans. Then they had an epic kind of a meeting, and then Stoicon, this like annual Stoic conference, emerged. The last one was in Athens, which I was at. And so this is trying to like bringing Stoicism back into public consciousness, and then understanding, kind of collectively understanding what it is and what it could be. And then these are like the problem childs of modern Stoicism. This is from Massimo Pigliucci's article. So Stoicism with a $sign, these are people who are trying to make money, trying to make some coin. Sometimes literally they're actually making coins, and off Stoicism, and brocism, or whatever, how you pronounce that. Is this sort of like that dude bro energy, kind of, I guess the manosphere would fall into this. And then Stoicism with an M, I think this is the military kind of purposing Stoicism to be more effective for war. And so Massimo is pretty critical of all these three kind of problem childs of modern Stoicism. And then there's weird Stoicism, which is what I belong to. So as I said, I run this place called the Stoa, and we didn't talk about Stoicism at all. Like probably 98% of the events are not about Stoicism. But and I don't think I've converted like anyone to Stoicism through the whole time of stewarding the Stoa. But I am strangely looking like Zeno. I think I'm probably a reincarnated version of Zeno. So there you have it. What's next? Okay, so that's Stoicism in a nutshell. Agree or disagree with it? I'm curious. There's like 52 comments. I'm just like, can't wait to look at them. So the whole kind of title of this presentation was Stoicism Addressing the Meta Crisis. And so this term, if you're from the Stoa, you might recognize this term, but this term might be new for a lot of people. And the meta crisis is just my definition, is the catch-all term for the ecology of all the bad shit that is collectively happening to us, or collectively can happen or will happen to us. So these include X risks, or existential risks. And some of these I took from Nick Bostrom's wonderful taxonomy, deliberate misuse of nanotechnology, badly programmed superintelligence, ecological destruction, genetically engineered biological agent, or what some of the people in the effective altruist movement call the suffering risks, or S risks. Like, think of if ever global tyranny emerges, and that would be a suffering risk. That's like, it doesn't make humanity go extinct, but it creates a hellish existence. And then my colleague, John Vervaeke, called it the meaning crisis, this widespread sense of meaninglessness in people's life. They don't know, what they should be deployed towards, and there's like just a felt sense of meaninglessness, which is associated with the mental health crisis. Then there's culture war 2.0. I argued in the past that the culture war is not a left and right affair. It's multiple, what I call mimetic tribes, just trying to compete for the mental real estate that is our minds. And then, Venkatesh Rao's term, the great weirding, the Tramacine, Game A, Moloch, all that type of stuff, all the bad shit. So this is the meta crisis. And once you grok the meta crisis, it's sort of like, oh, fuck, what do I do? Because it's kind of like, it could be depressing. Mark Fisher calls this reflective impotence. It's like you recognize that the world is so bad, you don't know what to do about it. And it kind of creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get, depressed and you don't act. And then the world ends up, bad shit ends up happening. So what do you do with the meta crisis? And I say Stoicism is actually a wonderful philosophy to have during the meta crisis. And I have 3 arguments for it. And I view them as argument sketches, because there's probably some premises that are suppressed that I can tease out. And so perhaps we can tease them out together. But argument number 1, I would call it embodied globalism. So embodied globalism, so it's being embodied while focusing on local concerns along with caring about their global significance. So this term globalism I quite like. It's like that, what was it? Act locally, think globally type thing, combined into one. And there's something about Stoicism that when you focus on what is in your control, going back to that dichotomy of control, it localizes your attention to your body and to your immediate environment. So there's like a local element to Stoicism, and it is really an embodied philosophy. If you get what you have under your control, your thoughts and actions into right relationship, and as Epictetus says, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. But there's also a cosmopolitan aspect to the Stoic worldview, and they view themselves as the citizens of the world. So that kind of that tension, like being a citizen of the world and having this more localized focus, I think creates this embodied globalism, where I think a lot of people who have power in the world, or what I would call disembodied globalists, where they're focusing on global concerns without their local significance. And I think that's a problem, and it amplifies the meta crisis. And so when you become a embodied globalist, of course, you end up looking like Ryan Gosling. So 2, doomer optimism. I think Stoicism affords a doomer optimism. And this is a term I got from Jason Snyder, who's, it's sort of the homesteading movement that's concerned with civilization collapse. And this is his quote, like, I'm not a doomer, I'm a pragmatic optimist. Part of being a pragmatic optimist is recognizing and emotionally processing the incredible challenges we face, then moving forward as if there's still hope. And I love that. And I think doomer optimism can go beyond just the homesteading movement to, and then kind of like a civilization collapse, to all facets of the meta crisis. I think that is the right disposition, being a doomer optimist. And this gentleman right here, James Stockdale, he was a Vietnam fighter pilot, and then his plane got shot down. And then when he was crashing, he says, okay, I have a date with Epictetus, because he studied the Stoics in military school. And then he was the only guy that didn't lose his shit when he was captive, because his fellow captives, they had unrealistic expectations that they were going to get released. Where Stockdale said, I might never get released. I could be here forever, tortured forever. But he still maintained that hope, where people had a false notion of reality, his fellow captives, and they just kind of lost their mind. So this is Stockdale's quote: "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with a discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." So this is called the Stockdale paradox. This is basically the same movement of doomer optimism. It's holding this tension of like, okay, shit is fucked. There's a meta crisis here. I'm not going to look away from it, but I'm not going to let go of this existential hope. And holding that tension together, that is the sweet spot that Stoicism affords. And I think that is what we need during the meta crisis. So argument sketch number 3, and I didn't know what picture to put here, so I took another Ryan Gosling photo. Remember amor fati, the Stoic heuristic? Every opportunity is an opportunity to practice our Stoicism. there's a Stoic dad joke that I make at the Stoa every time there's like a tech issue. I just say it's an opportunity to practice our Stoicism, because a more fat day, you love your fate. Whatever happens, you want it to happen, so you embrace that. And I think the meta crisis is the ultimate Stoic opportunity. It's a forcing function for us to practice our Stoicism, practice our virtue. So it's a wonderful reframe. I also think it could serve as a superordinate goal to ameliorate some of the culture war noise, because if you recall, when COVID came online, for a brief moment, like for a couple of months, no one was culture warring. It was like, oh shit, we got a pandemic, a virus, let's respond to it. And then when things stabilized a bit, then the culture war noise came. But if the meta crisis was present and the meta crisis awareness was there, perhaps that could serve as a superordinate goal. And then as a collective rite of passage, I put a question mark because that's getting a little bit too jazzy. But yeah, so that I'll stop there. And so the three arguments again: embodied localism, doomer optimism, and a collective opportunity. Stoicism, in the face of the meta crisis, affords those three things. And so there's the argument of why I think Stoicism is a great philosophy to have during the meta crisis. So boom, that's that. I'm going to stop the record button now.